Hello, bonjour, Tansi, bonjour, and welcome to today's uh, additional webinar. I almost called it a lunch and learn, but we're post-lunch now in most time zones. So we're here with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. My name is Sandra Bender. I'm the Community Engagement and Education Program Coordinator with the NCTR. Before I turn it over to our speakers today, I'm just going to share some quick housekeeping notes. First, there will be simultaneous translation into French and ASL available throughout the conversation. The ASL interpretation is live, which means that there could be errors or lags as our interpreter keeps up with what we assume is going to be a lively conversation. To have access in French, you will need to switch to the French channel, which is under the globe button called Interpretation. Il y aura une traduction simultanée en français sous le bouton appelé Interprétation. Vous pouvez trouver ce bouton sous le globe ou peut-être dedans les trois points appelés More. Pour le français, s'il vous plaît, changez la chaîne maintenant. We are very pleased to be partnering with Shapeshifter for our tech support this year. So thank you to those folk who are with us as well. This is a webinar setup, which means that cameras, microphones, and the chat function are not enabled. However, we would welcome you to use the Q&A function to submit questions, and our speakers will leave about 10 minutes to address some of them toward the end. There are a great number of people with us today, which means that we will not, I can guarantee we will not be able to answer all of your questions. But if you have a particularly urgent one that doesn't get answered, you can always send it to the same email that sent the Zoom link today, and we can potentially connect you with an answer. We expect that all questions will be asked with respect. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is located in Treaty 1 territory, which is the ancestral land of the Anishinaabe, Ininiwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Dene, and the Red River Métis. We are located in a province that sources its power from dams on the mighty river systems of the North in Treaty 5, and drink water that comes from Shoal Lake in Treaty 3. For all of us joining from across Turtle Island, I invite you to take a silent moment to consider the First Peoples whose lands these have always been and always will be, with or without regard for treaty. As we enter today's discussion, I invite you to open your minds, hearts, and spirits that we may speak truth, hear truth, and move forward together in better paths. It is now my honor to introduce today's speakers and moderators. Honestly, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, which organizations they're each representing. So in fact, I'm going to turn it to you, Fiona, and let you handle that. So Fiona Kirkpatrick Parsons is our moderator today. She's also, I'm just going to say, because she probably won't toot her own horn, she is also a real pioneer in this field of corporate reconciliation action plans. And the work she's done with Deloitte is truly groundbreaking and phenomenal. So Fiona, over to you.
Wow. Sandra, deepest thanks for that. I cannot take all the credit. I did have an amazing group of people to work with at Deloitte, and namely Alexandra Byron, who leads their reconciliation action plan still. But I certainly was involved in spearheading it, and I do thank you for acknowledging that. So I'm going to first introduce myself in my language, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you to have this important discussion. So I will begin by saying Tansi Kidoa Nitotamak, Fiona Nitasitigason Aquamina Kanipowit Nosi Wawaskasu. So what I said was, hello, my friends, all of you. My name is Fiona, and I carry a Cree spirit name, which is Standing Elk Woman. Nida Nihilo Isquio. Aquamina Moniao, meaning I am a woodland Cree, and I also have a Scottish heritage. Amachuis Bemoanik, Akomina Mistihi Sagiginik, Ochinida. So I am originally from a small community called Stanley Mission, which is part of the Big Lake, Lac La Ronge First Nation, which is on Treaty 6 territory. It's where I was born. Magamagawach, Nuigan, Sagasanok, Jupukduk, Mi'kma'ki. So I said, now I live in the East, in the beautiful, unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq. Jupukduk is a name that the Mi'kmaq gave the Great Harbor, also known as Halifax in Nova Scotia. So I'm really grateful to be here with you today. Why did I introduce myself to you in Woodland Cree or Nihidawiwin? Well, it's important for me to say these things and introduce myself this way because for so long, Indigenous peoples were discouraged and even forbidden to speak our languages. And as a result, many of us lost our languages and so much connection to our cultures. I am so grateful to be alive, to see this shifting, to see the resurgence that wasn't even a dream when I was growing up, and yet we still have challenges. However, we're going to talk about the challenges and the exciting momentum that we're seeing in terms of reconciliation within the corporate world. So I'd like to invite each of the panelists to share a bit more about themselves before we dive in. And I'll start with Keira, who is on my far right on the screen. Keira, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, thanks, Fiona. Hi, everybody. My name is Keira Cappo. I am from the Musqueam Saulteaux Nation, which is located in Treaty 4 territory here in southern Saskatchewan. I'm a mother to three boys, and I have been working for Enbridge for the last 5 years, working on most recently, my new work within the last year has been strategist for Indigenous Partnerships, policy and strategic initiatives, and most importantly, the work that is near and dear to my heart, the implementation of our Indigenous Reconciliation Action Plan. So I'm excited to share what we've been up to here at Enbridge. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Keira. Nadine, you're next.
Perfect. Thanks, Fiona. So my name is Nadine Patel. My parents settled on the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation in the 1980s, and so feeling very privileged and fortunate to be able to work and live on this territory. I'm the Director of Inclusion and Reconciliation with Sysco Canada. Proud to have launched our formal platform, Our Path Forward, earlier this year, which captures our commitments and our approach to reconciliation in Canada. And like Keira, looking forward to sharing a little bit about Sysco's journey in this space.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And Dan, over to
Thank
you.
you, Fiona. Miigwech ani buju dan amsnet taz and amki bakadong ninuji miigwech benigin mame manajuan. Hello, greetings. My name is Dan Adams. I live in Thunder Bay. Thank you for the welcome all together with respect. I grew up in small towns in Northern Ontario, in Red Rock, White River, Wawa, and I've been in Thunder Bay for 25 years and been with BMO for 15. I'm the head of the Office of Reconciliation, and our mandate is to continue to expand mutual respectful relationships with a consultative, respectful approach and to lead meaningful change. So thank you, Miigwech.
Wonderful. Thank you all. What a great occasion for us to join together at this stage, 10 years after almost the 94 calls to action were released by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And of course, since then, Canada has been on an increasingly accelerated journey, if you will, on reconciliation. That's me, the optimist, in there saying that, because I know there are areas where we haven't progressed. But in terms of corporate Canada, I've certainly seen a huge leap in how reconciliation is being activated in our organizations. So thank you all for being here to share your stories. I know you're all at different stages within your organizations as to where you are on the journey. So I think what I'd like to start with first, and I'd love to give each of you an opportunity to answer this question, why is reconciliation important for corporate Canada, and how do you see businesses playing a meaningful role? Who'd like to go first?
I can jump in.
Dan had his I saw Dan ready to go. Is that okay? Dan, over to you first.
Absolutely. And thank you. The way I look at it, why is, well, obviously we should. And but corporate organizations across Canada, they're essentially little slices of Canada, right? Bank Montreal alone, we have over 40,000 employees across Canada from coast to coast to coast, and we all have different backgrounds and different experiences. And some of us have lots of knowledge, some of us have little knowledge, and some are brand new Canadians, and they're just learning things for the very first time. So no matter where we all are on the path, it's important that we're going to walk the path together as an organization of 40,000 plus, and we're going to continue to learn, and we're continue to take one step in front of the other, and how we're going to learn is we start off with education. And we start off with the real history of Canada, and from an Indigenous perspective as well. We created a education online training course that's mandatory for all of our hires, and that came out about 6 years ago. It's called Nishnawtamanen, and it's in partnership with the First Nations University. That is the commitment is based on our commitment to TRC, call to action number 92. The 3 pillars are employment, education, and economic empowerment. And to answer your question, how a corporation could play a meaningful role, I think we could do various things, and I think we need to do them all. One of the things is we got to take care of our own organization first. So we need to be educated, and we need to take care of our Indigenous employees as well too. We have a program called Mikana program. It's for our Indigenous employees and make sure that they get the most out of their BMO career, and they're also in positions to be elevated as well. For our customers, it's a different story. We're looking for more equality and more inclusion to banking. And then for society is a different pillar. You could look at that as we're in a position that we could be a generous contributor. We could do that by donations, by sponsorships, and especially by procurement. So thank you.
Great summary. Thank you very much. Nadine.
Yes, no, I echo a lot of what Dan was saying. I think corporate Canada and all of us really have the opportunity to listen and learn and educate and inform. And I think because of our sheer capacity to impact and influence, we have that to help impact policy change, procurement, employment. And so there's lots of opportunities for us to ensure that we are addressing this in a meaningful and holistic manner. And I think we need to take that opportunity to actually make a sustainable change internally first, as Dan said, and then externally with the customers that we served, the other businesses that we work with, the communities that we support. So there's lots of avenues for us to support, and I think that's really where we can enhance in this space.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Keira.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I think why this is important to corporate Canada is because all of our businesses and all of our corporations, we all operate on traditional territory. We all operate on the lands of the First Nations and Métis groups, governments that where you operate, where your business is. And we have to remember going back into the truth part of reconciliation, right? And going back into the history of where were we? We were not a part of business. We needed to seek permission to leave the reserve from the Indian agent. We were not a part of the economy. And so I think it's really important that corporate Canada looks at dives into the truth, dives into what happened on these lands. And when we talk about the spirit of treaty, of the intention of that we were to work together. And for many, many years, again, we were not included in those discussions. We were not included in procurement, or we're not included as employees. And so, the time for reconciliation was yesterday, and we need to continue on this journey. And we talk about at Enbridge, we talk about our first IRAP was the journey ahead, and our second IRAP that we recently refreshed and released back in March was the journey continues, and that commitment to Indigenous people across Turtle Island, businesses can play a meaningful role in that by having, the reconciliation action plans, but having that support for your First Nations and Métis employees, and really being able to provide a space where we have the voice, and it's not just coming in one time and speaking, but it's meaningful change, and it's also learning and understanding the people that you're working with and where you're from. And we talk a lot about land acknowledgement and learning about who those people are, that we acknowledge the land that we are on. I think that's so important for corporate Canada to understand that the truth comes before the reconciliation, and learning and educating. And it's really meaningful to hear these education and these trainings that we have here at Enbridge. We also have a mandatory training that we've developed and created that every employee must take to understand that. But it goes beyond that as well. It's an individual commitment as well to take that on yourself, to be able to go out and learn and seek that guidance and seek that knowledge from whatever territory, whatever land, wherever you are based out of in Canada.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of passion in all of your voices, and it seems to me they have all of your organizations have excellent people in the roles. So thank you for bringing your passion and your interest forward, and obviously you're inspiring your colleagues to come on this journey with you. And I'm just does my heart good to see you all in these roles, and hearing your answers gives me a lot of hope that we're going in the right direction in this country. It's interesting to me that companies are taking on the role of educators. Before, other than training specific for your roles, and things like occupational health and safety, all that kind of stuff. But now we're training on history, shared history here in this country, and that organizations such as yours are advancing the education that we did not receive in school. Right? None of us received that education here in Canada. So kudos to your organizations for doing that, and to all the others who are on this path as well. So I'd love to know a little bit more about, what prompted each of your organizations to commit to reconciliation, and how did you get started? We'll start with that, and then I have another part to the question. So what prompted your organization to commit to reconciliation, and how did you get started? I'll start with Nadine this time. I'm just going to pick on you, Nadine.
No.
I'm going to change it up a little bit and go in a different order. So
No, of course.
share a little bit with us on that.
Yeah, so Sysco's commitment to reconciliation really formally began in 2020, when 215 bodies and remains of children were found in Kamloops. And so we really had to look internally. It was before my time with the organization, but we had to look internally to see what we were doing in place to help educate, and, like Keira mentioned, to really acknowledge the truth first of the history of this country. And so we started off by also implementing a mandatory onboarding and training for Sysco colleagues across Canada. And then we also entered into the Canadian Council for Indigenous Businesses PAIR program, their Partnership Accreditation in Indigenous Relations, formerly the PAIR program. And we really, at that time, used the PAIR framework as a roadmap and an action plan for us to develop our own reconciliation action plan. And so that's what prompted us to really start committing to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action number 92. And so since then, we have developed committees, boards, have built teams around ensuring that we have resources in place to internally first review what we're doing in terms of employment and procurement. And then really from then we started engaging in community engagement, connecting with Indigenous businesses that we work with to help inform internally help get leadership alignment. Of course, we're very fortunate with Sysco Canada that our executive leadership team and our regional leadership teams are very, they're advocates, they're allies, and they're really champions of what we're doing with our reconciliation action plan. And so that's definitely something that that we are looking to continue to strengthen and ensure that it's enterprise-wide and not just living with certain people and not just living with certain functions. And we do that mainly through education.
That's where it all starts, as the late Honorable Murray St. Clair said, it's education that got us into this mess, and it's education that's going to get us out. So I'm certainly hearing a theme here. So I'm going to give it to Dan right now and see, Dan, do you want to answer that query on my part on what prompted BMO to commit to reconciliation and how you got started?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, BMO's had valuable Indigenous relationships going over 200 years ago, with the nation of Ganawakwe. But however, I think the real substantial starting point was in 1992 when we were the first bank to create an Indigenous banking unit. At the time, it was called the Aboriginal Banking Unit, now the Indigenous Banking Unit, or IBU. And in the 90s, as we were starting to learn about the real laws and the truths and everything, one of the things that we found that was a real restriction was legislation, was the Indian Act. And the Indian Act, of course, is, it's old, it's discriminatory, and it was built in 1876. How that really affects a bank is Section 89. So Section 89 of the Indian Act prohibits a lender from taking security. And for many, many years or generations, it was, well, if we don't have recourse for a loan, we are unable to provide a loan. That prohibited people from owning their own home in their own community. And that wasn't right. So in the mid-90s, we created an on-reserve housing loan program, which circumvents the Indian Act. And so that was one of the first things that we said, okay, well, if we're not going to change the law, we have to figure this out for our customer and to do the right thing. Since then, every year, we just try to get a little bit better. We changed commercial policies so we could lend to a First Nation without taking any security. And they could build, infrastructure and clean water facilities, economic development, buying businesses and creating employment. So all those things, you often need a banking partner. So every year we try to change policy, remove old colonial systemic barriers within policies that have always been there, sometimes not with bad intentions, but it was there nonetheless. That needs to be removed so we could have more inclusion and we could help our customers more. My own reconciliation journey is in living in small towns and half the community were Indigenous, and you know what, we never really talked about it at that time. They were just friends and neighbors, and so I'm not Indigenous, but my children are. Their mom is, and their father or their grandfather was born in Seguin First Nation in Treaty 1, and now my daughters and I were learning the language together, that same language where their grandfather was unable to speak because he wasn't allowed to, and I know that would warm his heart. And so again, like, everyone has their own story and their own path, and so that's my personal path for reconciliation. To me, is personal for my family.
Thank you, Dan. That's a great reflection, and having that personal passion for something is certainly really helps the organization move along, right? Sometimes it just takes that really passionate person to ignite that fire. So thank you for doing what you do. Keira, over to you.
So I think Enbridge has had relationships with First Nations and Métis governments for many years, and many of it comes from the duty to consult and for the regulator or the government telling us how we need to engage with them. And over time, became apparent that the nations, they wanted to be engaged on another level. wanted more. It was time for more, and we acknowledge in our IRAP right now that historical lack of inclusion. We have an acknowledgement of that we may not have always gotten it right, but we're committed to getting it right as we move forward. And we have had an Indigenous peoples policy since the early 2000s, which was a small document, but it was a commitment. And I think back in 2020, when the work started and the calls to action number 92 came out, was really when we began to formalize that work that we were doing. We formalized the commitments, and we sought the advice, and we looked at the First Nations and Métis perspectives, and looked at Indigenous-led consultants that helped guide this work to ensure that we were getting it right, to ensure that it was just not words on a paper, that there was action and meaningful action to it behind it, and the work that we do. So the 6 pillars that we have in the IRAP really talk about what was important and what the Indigenous people have told us was important, that looked at people, employment, and education, and equity, Indigenous financial partnerships, economic inclusion, looking at our governance, environmental stewardship. And so I think a lot of the discussions and learning from our engagement teams we're on the front line, as well as our leadership discussions with our executive leadership, from leader to leader discussions, really helped guide this work and really helped to motivate our company to move forward in this space, and to make it meaningful. And I think we're getting there, and we're doing it, and it's Indigenous led, and we have a lot of input from our Indigenous colleagues that lead the working groups, or that lead the programs that we're trying to move forward. And our first IRAP had 22 commitments, and we're able to track that progress over the last 2 years, and show that we wanted action, and we want to make sure that we're doing it in a meaningful way with the input of the people that we work with, and that we're able to share and guide us moving forward. And there's been so much discussions and learning, and mistakes, and learning from those mistakes, and tough conversations that have had to happen over the last few years, that I think really helped us understand each other, and understand how we want to move forward as a company. And I feel very strongly that our leadership supports this work, and it's meaningful. And as I mentioned before, it's not just words on a paper, that there's going to be action there, and Enbridge is committed to making those changes, and substantial changes within our processes and policies.
Thank you, Keira. It's so important to have that support from leadership, right? Like having that come from the top. Sometimes it can be a real uphill struggle at times, and we're going to talk about the challenges and learnings in a moment. But I really appreciate your insights there. So all of you sort of touched on a couple of initiatives. I really like to kind of dive into that a little bit more, and maybe if you could share another one or maybe 2 sort of concrete initiatives that your organizations have been implementing, and what impacts you've seen so far. I'll throw this open to whoever wants to jump in first. Dan.
I can share.
Well, I see his light was on. He beat
okay.
the buzzer.
Yeah, sure. There's many things I'm quite grateful of that we have within our organization, that we could move forward down the path. One of the things that's probably the most benefit is we have an Indigenous Advisory Council, and this council is now 6 years old, and there's 10 Indigenous leaders, all from First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, from coast to coast to coast, all with their own experience and expertise and knowledge and perspectives. And so we meet with them on a regular basis, and we just do touch-ins. And what's different about an Indigenous Advisory Council, say, compared to governance, is that it's ground level. It's we're working on a policy, or we're starting a new journey down a path, and we're able to touch in and say, are we on the right path? Are we thinking of this in the right way? Is there anything that we're forgetting, that we're missing, that we need to include so everyone's, included, and we're taking care of, our customers in a good way? Our Indigenous Advisory Council are amazing, and you're welcome to go on the website and see who they are. They're just truly impressive, and what a benefit to have that. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing would be my new position. Is we created an Office of Reconciliation, and that's an organization saying is we are investing into this. We have always done good work, but it was always other people or all of us doing our jobs and then doing these other things on the side of our desks.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I think we all do it, but sometimes those things are just too important for the side of the desk. Those things need the investment and the commitment and the dedication. So our team is dedicated to reconciliation. Now, we don't have all the answers, but that's why we ask a lot of questions and we listen and we're flexible. And we like to say almost everything we do is kind of a work in progress, because we want to be way better in 6 months than we are now, and keep going like that, because that's the only way to do it. So we're just keeping an open mind and an open heart as we do this.
Excellent. Keira.
I got excited there. Sorry, everyone.
Don't be ever apologize for being enthusiastic. That's great.
I think one of my favorite initiatives and what I really love working on is my title says Indigenous Partnerships. And so I really see a movement in our company on those Indigenous equity financial partnerships. We've recently announced the Stone Leseke Indigenous Alliance, which represented 38 First Nations in British Columbia and 12.5% equity into our West Coast natural gas pipeline system. More closely to home for me is our Seven Stars Wind Energy Project, a partnership with 5 First Nations and the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, Enbridge, and working with SaskPower. And so this is my favorite work, because as I mentioned before, we weren't always a part of the economy. We weren't always a part of business. And, this is what makes changes in your community. This is where you provide that own source revenue, that you're able to spend that money on your community and what's important to you and what drives you and how that just impacts and benefits the community. And it's my favorite part of my job, is having these discussions with the First Nations and Métis, and being able to advance really critical work. And this is something that I've heard from when I started at Enbridge, when I started as my dad was a former chief for many, many years. And, he talked about these things with us of being excluded, but also, we need to be at the table and we need to be a part of it. And, I'm really proud to sit at these tables on behalf of Enbridge to have these discussions and navigate through the company on, how it is working with First Nations people and Métis people, and how can we really work together, and how can I help the process so that we are successful? It's such meaningful work, because I know this impacts not only the leadership, but our people, our members, our youth, and our elders, and the people that live on the res. I grew up on the res, and so I understand what that's like. And so to have that extra equity flowing into your community, I think is really meaningful. And so that has been one initiative. Another, really quickly, is one of our new commitments, which is having Indigenous-led cultural education opportunities for our board of directors and our leadership, and seeing as that's in our new refresh, but just being able to have again that top down from that leadership of having that, why this is important and why we put so much into this work, and having again the support of our leadership, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really enables those doors to open. And thank you so much. It's great to see anybody under the age of 50 is a youngster to me, but it's great to see young people entering this space because it really is giving me hope for the future of organizations in Canada on this journey. Nadine, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So, two big initiatives that particularly stand out for me. The first one is Sysco North. So we launched this platform. Sysco is globally traditionally business to business. We don't have a retail model, but in 2021 we launched Sysco North, which is our approach to help deliver fresh and accessible food to remote northern communities. And so when we first started, I believe we were working with 10 to 15 communities, mainly in the prairies and the territories. And now we have engaged and we serve 28 communities with throughout the prairies and territories. And that again is to help ensure that fresh and affordable food is accessible. And so this is deviating from our B2B model, but we do believe that everyone, of course, deserves food. Everyone deserves access to fresh food. And so we have a team in our Prairies region that oversees Sysco North, and the impact within Sysco Prairies has really sparked a catalyst throughout Sysco Canada. And so now we have an Indigenous Relations Manager in each of our 4 regions that really supports the communities that we serve, as well as addressing business development opportunities for Indigenous businesses to really grow, in the food industry and even just anybody really that purchases food. So that's the first big one that comes to mind. And then the second one right now is our approach really to support economic reconciliation. And so being a food service leader, we notice that there is a massive gap of Indigenous owned suppliers in food service. And so we earlier this year have come together with other food service leaders to create Pathways to Procurement. That's the program's name. Pathways to Procurement, our objective is to help strengthen Indigenous procurement in food service space. And so it's a multi-phased program. Right now we're in the insights and collaboration phase, so working with industry leaders to help address barriers and opportunities for Indigenous businesses to thrive in the food service supply chain. The second part of this is to have focus groups so that we can continue learning from micro Indigenous suppliers of larger companies that are more established and learn how we should be pivoting our gateway into our supply chain so that it's not necessarily us saying this is what you have to do, but we understand that we need to change our own processes. And then the third part for Pathways to Procurement is an education piece. And so we're working on developing mentorship sessions and opportunities with our industry leaders just to help fuel and provide that mentorship for Indigenous suppliers, again, in food service. And I think something that is really special, particularly about Pathways to Procurement, is a lot of the industry partners are technically competitors in this space, coming together and putting community and collaboration over everything. And so that's something that we're really excited to launch now, and we'll learn more about it. You'll learn more about it in the coming months as we unfold this approach.
Great. These are all great. I hope people are going to either writing quickly and getting your ideas down, or they're going to watch the recording because there's an awful lot of information being packed in today. So we're going to dive in because I'm mindful of time and we have a little bit more to get through. But I think that this is going to be a really important part of the conversation around challenges and learnings. We know that the path of reconciliation is not a straight line to this glorious destination called reconciliation. There are challenges along the way. I know that from personal experience, and there are learnings. And I'm really curious, and I'm sure the audience is curious as well, to know what challenges or resistance perhaps have you faced, and how have you worked those through those challenges? whatever you're willing to share, I'd love to hear. And if you'd like to add a second part to that, if you want to give any advice to organizations that want to begin the reconciliation journey, but feel uncertain, or overwhelmed. So challenges and resistance, have you worked through those, and any advice you'd give as a result of those learnings? Who'd like to dive in here?
I could go first again, I guess.
Go ahead.
I've made mistakes on that. So I've been, a commercial banker for decades, and a lot of what I learned is from my customers, is from, being in community. Half the time is, we jump in our truck and we go in community, and that's when we do our best work. And that's when I did my best learning as well too. When I was in community, sitting down with the council, or with an elder, or with a housing manager, or whatever reason I was there. When we started doing more internal education, it was right after 2015, and I could say, that the calls to action really helped us with that, because it was something concrete saying it is our role to do education. We need to educate ourselves. So the very first time I facilitated an education session, and I'd like to be clear, I'm not an expert. So when I say education session, I bring in local experts, and they teach us. But afterwards, I've always thought I did too much, because I tried to force it upon my colleagues, because in my heart, I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew they needed to learn. I knew they needed to be better. And I was a little bit too forceful. And I learned over the years that most people have good hearts and they have good intentions. So if you give them some education, but also some space, then they will start walking the path on their own, and they're not forced to do so. And that's way more effective, because when they do it on their own, that's when it sticks.
Yeah.
And when you try to force it, it just doesn't work as well. And when it sticks, that's when it becomes an everyday core value in their own lives. And that's when it becomes really meaningful. So the advice I would give is probably the best piece of advice I've ever read, and is from Chief Robert Joseph, is when he says, when you take the first step, take another. Yeah. And it's walking the path, it's not sprinting. So be thoughtful, build relationships, make it personal, and make it a part of you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I actually have his book right beside me, Namwayat, right on my desk.
It's so good.
Yes, a brilliant book. Highly recommend. Who else would like to go? Nadine, Keira, who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I can go. I again echo what Dan said. I think education continues to be a pillar for us. So not necessarily resistance, but challenges. Is we've had some leadership changes over the last few years at the executive level, and so still being very fortunate in Canada to have the majority of our executive leadership team and regional leadership team understands what goes into having meaningful reconciliation and ensuring that the resources are in place to do that. And so because of the changes in our leadership, having that internal education continues to play an important part. And then advice, again, being mindful of time, but advice that I would give is just to start. And so Sysco, as I mentioned earlier, we're about 5 years into our more formal journey. And so I can even say for me personally, it's impossible to get it all right all at once. And for it to be a sustainable journey, I think taking time, but making progress, continuing to move forward, it has been the key for us.
Great. Thank you. Keira.
I think there has been the challenges personally for myself starting to do this work was, I think sometimes we want to just jump into reconciliation and not understanding why we're doing it, or the truth behind it, or understanding the history of and understanding our nations. Our nations are so unique and dynamic, and yes, there's similarities, and we can compare some, but what I struggle with is having kind of a one size fits all approach to each nation, because we know that they're a government, we know that what drives them, what impacts them, and I think having to slow down and share that and learn from the nations and governments that we work with, that we can understand where they're coming from, and we're not just creating something that, oh, this worked for a nation in Saskatchewan, so it has to work for a nation in BC, right? And so really just bringing that knowledge and awareness to my colleagues, and learning from our community and Indigenous engagement team and our tribal engagement teams, because we really understand the communities and being in there, and then the leadership that have approved and start our IRAP is like bridging that gap of there's so people that are so used to the processes and the policies that have been going on for 76 years for us. So having to share why we're pushing Indigenous businesses and why it's important to change policy and processes. And my advice to companies is, get to know the Indigenous people of where your company operates. And it starts with tobacco. Take that tobacco to whoever you're working with, an elder, a community, a chief, and get their perspectives, and hear from them on how they want to work with you. For so long, we're told how to work, and we're told, and this is how things are, but now we have a voice in these spaces, and we're able to make that change. And really, I always share this with any colleague and presentations, is like, get to know us, get to know where we come from. And it starts with that tobacco. For me personally, have that honest conversation and get that guidance, because that's where it starts. It's it may be daunting, but once you open up that tobacco, that knowledge starts coming out. And really, that's what has helped guide me in this work, because I speak for myself as a Muscogee Saulteaux Nation, but having to work with many different Indigenous nations across Canada and the US, I think that would be my advice, is take that time and get to know where you're working.
Yeah, and to your point, get to know the specific protocols too. Sometimes it's tobacco, sometimes it's something else, but I really appreciate your unique insight there. So many great thoughts and ideas. I'm really very conscious now, because I want us to kind of do a bit of a quick round. I do want a quick response on this, if you can. How do you measure success in reconciliation work? We're going to look forward here. What does progress really look like to you? And briefly, what gives you hope about the future of reconciliation in corporate Canada? So Nadine, I'll jump to you first.
Yeah, I think for us it's twofold. So impact, I think, can be visibly measured by, just even having conversations with colleagues internally, some of our partners, and when it feels genuine and not necessarily forced or like it's lip service, we have the programs to back it up. And then I mentioned earlier, we're part of the CCIB PAIR program, and the framework for PAIR is very robust, and it includes a framework to track and measure progress. And so that's just another way that we're continuing to measure our progress in this space.
Great. What gives you hope? What gives you hope about the future?
What gives me hope is, I think just connecting with communities and connecting with businesses and being able to continue to learn and have our leadership. I think that's really fundamental for us, our leadership support, to ensure, again, that we have the resources to actually move forward in this space and not just be stagnant.
Got it. Thank you very much. Dan.
Yeah, well, personally, I think it's how you feel in your heart. And if you want to, prove that, it's how you speak and it's your actions. Corporate Canada, on the other hand, it's all about measured success. And you can put metrics to this, just like Nadine was saying, this CCIB PAIR program. That's a perfect example. So that's a third party now looking at corporate Canada saying, what have you really done? So BMO's part of that. We're a gold pair. We have been for the last 21 years. And that's something that we talk about all the time, is we need to keep doing well because we need to keep our gold status with CCIB. And because they look at, how many people did you hire? How many communities have you helped? What was your retention? What's your procurement? All those things, those all have metrics that you could see that are you doing better than you did before? Are you progressing? And so that's the real reconciliation part. Are you walking the talk?
Yeah, I'm a little bit biased. I'm on the board of the CCIB. I'm also a pair facilitator. And so I'm a little bit biased. And so I totally agree with you. I think it's a great framework and really does help companies measure success. The other piece, I'm going to jump to you in a second, Keira, but that the Globe and Mail did their year in charts. I think it was January of 2024. And they looked at publicly traded companies. And it was through the TSX. And they actually marked gauged which companies were participating in pair versus those who were not, and their performance always was better than the ones that weren't. So really significant. That's a real dollars and cents thing. And I think that builds a business case for actually taking part in reconciliation. Okay, Keira, over to you. How do you measure success in reconciliation? What does progress look like to you?
Well, like corporate Keira will say that we have we report into our sustainability report, and we want to make sure that we're accountable for what we're doing and for these commitments that we have put into place. But Res Keira from the Res wants to see improved relationships and meaningful substantial changes within organizations. Gone are the days where we can, piecemeal off procurement or, do one-time payments, but it needs to be real, meaningful action that benefits the communities and the people that we work with. And that, it's not just, hey, we got a project, we're here, we're done, see you later. That we have, a commitment to have a life cycle engagement for as long as our assets are working, right? And so I think it's having that Indigenous voices and opinions in spaces, especially in leadership, right? We want to be in the C-suite. We want to be, at those executive levels, and we're getting there, and we need to work harder, and our organizations need to work harder in providing those opportunities so that we can be at the decision-making table, and that we are the ones approving, these plans. And so I think that's how we, I know there's corporate programs and policies, and one of our pillars is focused strictly on reporting and making sure that we are tracking that. So
amazing. Thank you so much. Nadine, I already caught you on this question, didn't I? Or am I dreaming? No, I did.
Yes.
I asked you first. Yeah, did I? All right. We're going to do a quick roundtable closing, and then I'm going to look at some audience questions. I know we will not be able to get through them all, so I'm going to try to. I know that the team has put some up in front of me so that I can share them with all of you and put those questions to you. So we're going to do a quick roundtable closing in one sentence, if you can do it. What's the most important action that a business leader can take tomorrow to advance reconciliation? Who wants to jump in?
I can go. I think being willing and open to learn about the history of Canada. So again, going back to truth as the first step in advancing reconciliation.
Amazing. Thank you. That might have been a semicolon sentence, but that's okay. That counts. Dan, I think I saw your light come on there.
Sure. For reconciliation and for leaders, particularly non-Indigenous leaders, they need to do the work, and they need to lead reconciliation by example, but in a humble and a very authentic way.
Thank you. Keira.
To know the people, the nations that you talk about in your land acknowledgements.
Brilliant. Absolutely. And I think that sometimes that gets overlooked. I think that's an extremely important first step for sure. All right, we're going to go to some audience questions. I'm going to just quickly scroll. I know we only have a couple of minutes, and I know the team want to do a wrap up here. Okay, so here's one. How do you address anti-Indigenous racism and bias as you implement your reconciliation plans? Reconciliation plans can also have a dark side and can negatively impact Indigenous staff. I'll take maybe whoever wants to answer this. Not everybody has to. Who would like to take this one? Anyone have a thought?
It's really important to have those tough conversations. As a First Nations woman that works in this space, I've experienced that, and we talked about it in resistance. And it's about, again, education and sharing why, because most importantly, we were not. It was government policy that we were not a part of mainstream society, and so that it's an ignorance, it's a lack of not knowing who we are. So I think it's really important that you have to have those conversations, and you have to address it, and I've had to address it in meetings, and even if my voice shakes, and even if and again, on the Indigenous colleagues, I always have to ensure that, when I speak for Keira, Keira who grew up on the res, and Keira who's from the Musqueam Saulteaux Nation. And I always have to make that, preface that with that term, so that, all of my Indigenous colleagues have so many different experiences. They come from so many backgrounds and lived experiences, that I always want to ensure that as I represent, this IRAP, that, we're having those conversations on, how can I do better? How can I support you? How can we do that? And we do have a Indigenous employment program as well that supports that work internally with through our HR group and the team that works there. I think it's just being honest and having to face those up front, and it's tough, it's challenging, it really is.
Thank you, Keira. I think as Indigenous person on the panel, I'm going to leave that comment there. We do have other questions, and I would like the other panelists to think about this too. Another question is, I'm wondering about the importance of leadership really championing actionable work towards reconciliation in corporate spaces. Are there accountability measures and expectations in place? Kind of talked about that a little bit. Can sometimes feel performative when it's often disproportionate labor on Indigenous folks and folks in EDI/reconciliation/partnership roles. So the importance of leadership really championing this and the impact of that. Who would like to take that one?
I have a comment on that, because I've seen that in corporate Canada, where Indigenous becomes a DEI factor, and it's not at all. Especially, I speak on behalf of financial institution. I mean, Indigenous are customers. They're governments, they're people, they're organizations. It's not at all an HR thing. It's so we need to be better for our customers. And of course, when we talked about different metrics and things like that, how we can measure, are we doing better this year than we did last year to keep moving forward. But I think that's a common mistake in corporate Canada. And it's something that we all have to get past. One way to call it out is to have a culture of your organization where you can. It's okay to call it out in a kind of respectful way. And our organizations on this panel, they're large organizations with thousands of people. They're sometimes ignorant people, and it's okay to educate. And you need a culture that you're able to do that in a safe place.
That can be very heavy lifting for Indigenous folks in roles like this, and I speak from experience.
And that's why we need non-Indigenous people to call out non-Indigenous people.
Got it.
That's the next level allyship.
Got it. So I can tell our time is coming to a close because Sandra's back on the screen, but I do want to quickly wrap up. First of all, to thank you all. I wish we could have gotten to all the questions. There were so many, but thank you all for sharing your experiences and insights today. What we've heard, I think, is that reconciliation in corporate Canada is about more than statements. It's about sustained action. It's about listening with humility, Dan, you mentioned that, and building authentic relationships. Keira and Nadine, you talked about that. We've also heard that progress takes courage, right? It takes persistence and a willingness to measure ourselves against the commitments that we've made. So as we close, I invite everyone here to reflect on one action you can take in your own workplace tomorrow to advance reconciliation. You've heard some great ideas here today. It's in those collective steps that we create lasting change. So I want to thank you. I want to thank NCTR for having us here today. Thank you to the panelists and to everyone on this call for being part of this very important conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for starting this wrap up already, Fiona, and thank you for your excellent moderation. Thanks to our attendees for the excellent questions as well. Yeah, it looks like progress is being made. So thank you all for attending. We have one more lunch and learn this week tomorrow at 12 noon, and the topic is one that I would really like to draw your attention to, which is on residential school denialism. So we'll see you tomorrow at noon, I hope, or else you can catch these sessions after the fact online. All right, thanks very much, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.